Okay, this is a very basic tutorial on getting uh, an animation on a NIF, like a clutter object, a door, a gate, pretty much anything that's very basic you can do with this method. It doesn't seem very many people know about it, obviously. What you need to do first, the very first thing, is find Animation Tools N4 Body Animator by Anton 0028. It's in the utilities over here, and there's two things. There are two files here. One is the body animator, which is an executable. The other is the 3ds Max export script, and that's what I'm going to be using. I think this actually comes with scripts for Blender, so this should all pretty much work the same way. This guy obviously uses Blender. The guy who made this script was Manic Zombie, and it's alpha version. Obviously, I don't think it exports everything right, but it does just very basic stuff. If you have 3ds Max and you want to just stay in 3ds Max and not get back into Blender, like me, you can at least get some very basic stuff going. So you have to download both of these scripts. That's the first part. The body animator it just comes in this. Whenever you extract it, it'll be example folder, info folder, scripts for Blender 2.65 folder, body animator, a DLL, and a README. So this will be the body animator. The Mac script is simply will be, they'll have an example of what this does, and then here's your MS Mac script file, and you're gonna need this. And basically, how you would use this, you can either create your own macro script and run it like I do. I have it on a quad, or of course, you can drag this and just drop it into the viewport. So with that out of the way, obviously I was making this video and I had some problems, so we're just going to start from scratch. The first thing we're going to do is just create something very simple. We'll try a cylinder. Or we'll use a box. How about that? Hold down Control to get it uniform. We'll take this box and we'll convert it to editable poly or mesh. It doesn't matter, however you want to do it. Maybe we can throw in some chamfer just to make it look a little bit more interesting. And with this, I used a quad chamfer from Rapid Tools. It's worth the $30. You get 600 tools plus a hot bar. So everything should be a quad. I like to make sure it's a quad. You just come in here to selection on your ribbon. Well, if I can click it, select non-quads, and you have to be in the polygon sub-object mode. So everything looks good. Now what we want to do two things first. Well, we'll start with this, and I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Export it, and we'll just copy over this. So we export the NIF with the exporter, and you should have the exporter if you're following along in this. There's an exporter on the Nexus. There's also one at the NIF Tools place, and I'm trying to get a hold of one of the guys at NIFscope because he said there's a newer version out. I just can't seem to find it on the NIFscope site and at GitHub. So anyways, we don't have collision. We can't get collision on here. Everything else should be default. Doesn't matter if you remove skin modifier. Make sure it's Skyrim. Make sure it's without animation, and it's BS fade node. Although you can convert this into you can convert from 9 node to BS fade node in NIFscope. So we'll do that. Now, you know what? This is a very good lesson for us. The first thing, before we had done that, the most important part is that we actually align this up. So we need to go into the hierarchy tab, effect pivot only, and center this to object. This is so important. It won't really work right. It will mess it up if we don't have this. So we have to make sure that it's centered, and then we'll come up to select and move and right click it, and then right click each of the spinners to zero them out. And now it is directly in the middle, and that's how we want it. And now we're going to export that again. So one of the issues with this exporter is that apparently you can't have rotation on the bones. So whenever you make the bone, it has to be in the spot that you put it, and you can't rotate it. You really don't want to move it. You don't want to mess with it. So let's create a bone for this. Alternate, right click, and go to Bone Tools. We'll create just a very basic bone. Let's go in the top view, and we'll use the snap. You can right click the snap and just go to grid points, and we'll put it the length of it. Right click. So you have your bone, you have your nub. You can hit S again to get rid of the snap toggle, and then right click again to get out of create bones mode. And now everything is centered because we centered our mesh. Now this is centered as well. Now all we're going to do is scrub this all the way to the end. Let's go into perspective, and we're just going to move it out here. Well, I'm not going to get fancy. Because I just tried a whole bunch of different ways of using a squash bones, rotating around thing, and I could not get this to work. So far this only works on positional keys, and what we need to do, I guess first let's go ahead and just put a skin modifier on there so we can see where this is moving. You would just go into the modifier tab and get a skin modifier. This is active type, by the way, if you want to get it at script spot. So we have a skin modifier on there. Now what we need to do is just add the bones. Select both of them, make sure they're in there. We can now grab the bone. So it should be default weighted. If it's not default weighted, you can edit the envelope. You can come here and play with the envelope. See if it's not weighted. All that is solidly weighted. Or you can come in the edit envelopes, go to the vertices, come down to your, whatever this thing's called, weight tool, select all your vertices, and just put it at the maximum, 1. So it will follow this. You won't have any tearing or stretching or whatever. If that's a problem, if you have, so you might have to weight something. You might have to weight a mesh if it gets too complicated. So now that we have that, let's grab our bone. We don't want the nub, we want the actual bone. Auto key, and we're just going to move it out. Okay. Now we need our script. So grab your 3ds Max export script and drop it into your viewport. It will look like this. Oh, this was the bridge I was going to cross. You'll notice there's no paths here, and you can type the paths in, but that's a little ridiculous. What we need to do is get out of that, and you do have to close it. You can't just minimize it or move it off screen. And we need to save this file. And you need to make sure you know where it's being saved at. This is very important that you know where it's being saved at, because it's going to create text files in here. So we will replace that. And now get your script out again. You'll notice that the fields are put in. The first thing we need to do is just select the mesh and collect the object. So whatever objects, and the objects here have to have the skin modifier. Have to. It's not going to work if it doesn't have a skin modifier. It'll throw errors at you whenever you go through the thing. I'm trying to take this a little bit slow so nobody gets overwhelmed, if you wonder why I'm moving so slow. And then both of the bones, the bone including the nub, collect. And that is it. Then hit export. Sometimes you might get an error here, and that's because you didn't follow what I did. You did something wrong. So go back and watch this again, I guess. So we need to go back to where we extracted our animation tools. The animation tools in 4 body animator. Here's what we need to do. Now we need to, you can right click, open up a new window in your Explorer, and find where you saved that file. So remember, we saved the max file. We did not the export NIF, but this the max file, and it created these 3 text files: skeleton text, weights, Z-bone keys. We need to copy or cut them, and I just put them in here. I just put them just to make it real simple in the animation tools body animator folder. Now the next thing we need is the NIF that we originally exported. See, we didn't save a NIF. We didn't export it after we put all the bones on. We exported it before we did all that. We deleted it, we imported it in, and now we need this. And again, I just drop it right into here, the main folder. So what we can do at this point, what we need to do now that we have all of our stuff, we need to, we need to run a command line. So if you have a Windows key on your keyboard, you can hold that down and hit R till we get to the run, and then just type in CMD. Or you can come into your Windows and just type in CMD, enter. And I just drag it over here. to the side. And the first thing we need to do is we need to grab the body animator and drop it in. So you're going to grab it, the body animator, and you're going to drop this in. This is very important. Now you need to make sure that it's highlighted, because sometimes you can just hit enter, the spacebar, but sometimes you have to re-highlight it by clicking inside here. So the point is that this, after we drop this in, this needs a space behind it. Has to have a space. It's not going to work unless you put a space behind everything you drop in. Now the next thing is the test NIF. We'll drop that in. See, I need to click it in here and then spacebar. So we have the executable, the NIF, then we start with the skeleton text, spacebar, weights text, spacebar, bone keys. And you don't have to put a space behind this, but just make sure it's the window's active, and then hit enter. And then it will ask you the index to attach the thing. And this is where we exit this, because I forgot to do something. It will create a test NIF underscore new. We'll just go ahead and delete that. Now, what we need to do is we need to take this test NIF 0, the original one, and we need to open it up in NIF scope. Now you might not have a nigh property on yours, but because I use a script that it attaches a gray material every time I make a new primitive, every time I export I have a nigh property. Why that's important we'll show you in a second. So what we need to do is we need to right click. If this isn't BS fade node, you probably did something wrong, but if it isn't a BS fade node, make sure you come down to block, convert, and there'll be a Bethesda and then a BS fade node. But what we want to do right here, as long as this is a BS fade node and everything looks good, we need to come into node, attach node, and come down here to the bottom and attach a nigh node. That's what we need to do. Now it'll put it at number 1, but we got to make sure we check this out. So now we're going to save it, and we'll save it in the same place that we had it, the animation tools. Yes. And after we saved it, now it will organize it. And you'll notice that this 9 node that we created has a number next to it, and that's 4. And that is the armature number. Yes, so we need to remember this number. Of course, people are calling me. Let's see. So now the test NIF is done. Let's run the command line again. And we'll drop in the body animator, make sure there's a space. Drop in the test NIF, make sure there's a space. Skeleton text, space. Weights, text, space. Bone keys. And then we just hit enter. Enter index of 9 node to attach new armature. Of course, ours was 4. Yours might be 3 because you don't have a property, a texture property on there. Enter. And it seemed to have worked. So I'll hit enter again, and it created this. So let's close NIF scope, because obviously you can't double click it if you have it mapped to it. So we'll get into here. As you can see, I don't know if it's my exporter, but it's been doing this a lot to me lately, where it'll actually detach a bunch of my tri-shapes. But the animation should still be there. I don't know if these were flipped. No idea. No idea. But regardless, now we have an animated NIF. And I mean, of course, you can get much crazier with it. And you know, you might be able to use chunk merge and put on collision on these objects. The way I put collision on in Max will not work for this at all, as far as I know. I haven't actually tried to take this new NIF that we created with animation and then import it into Max. I have a feeling that's not going to work, but there it is. And I think you know something else that I noticed is that whenever you play this, see, it looks like it's shorter. So if you want something at a specific link, you might actually make it much longer than we dragged it. I don't know if that's because there's a limit on how far it goes. That might be the case. I have no idea. But it doesn't seem to be nearly as long as what I originally dragged. So, I guess that is the video. I hope you guys found something interesting. Hopefully I can, once I get some help, that this video will hopefully facilitate some people getting interested in this, and we can figure out how to get rotation and scaling and all that other kind of good stuff for animation and get it properly exported from 3ds Max.